like a lot of people today, they have a real interest in, I think, mental fitness and mental toughness. So I think if you could share some of that, it'd be super valuable for people. Like your thoughts on that and your
share my mental toughness.
Yeah, I think probably what, like you were talking about, people love hearing about your experience in the war and in jail. So what allowed you to get through that as well as you did? And, my impression of the story, as you told before, is like you really you contributed to other guys. Like, whereas a lot of guys, I don't want to say this the wrong way, because I don't want to sound like we're diminishing anyone else. That's not my intention. It just sounds like some guys, I'll just say this, some guys, it was harder on them than others. I mean, I think a big part of that was when they got there and what they went through. But also, I think you were prepped for it. You mentioned swimming and all that. So I think I've said enough. I think you could run with it.
Yeah, the swimming, my senior year was so miserable. All before that, swimming was just swimming. Yeah, I mean, I could jump in the pool.
Yeah,
and it wasn't horrible to be in the water. The water was pleasant normally.
Mm-hmm.
But then my senior year at high school, it was pure misery the whole time. All right, so you asked me if I thought I had mental toughness. I suppose that's as good a description as any. And where it came from was mainly when I was a kid. My parents were divorced when I was 3 years old. So I lived with my grandparents, and I don't ever remember living with my father. Never lived with him.
Yeah.
Got to live with my mother beginning when I was in the fourth grade. The fourth grade, yeah. So all up until the fourth grade, I lived with my grandparents.
Full time with them?
Yeah.
Did Honey live there too, or
no? She. The earliest or latest that I can recall was she worked in Oak Ridge, Tennessee, helping to manufacture the first atomic bomb.
Really?
Yeah, in Oak Ridge. That's where all the uranium was built, invented, whatever they mined, whatever they call it. It wasn't a mine there. No, it wasn't mined in Oak Ridge.
Yeah.
The material that contained uranium was shipped into Oak Ridge in very secure railroad car.
Come here. No, come here. We're recording.
So she worked in a big the refining device. She didn't know what she was doing. She had a job sitting on a high stool, along with some other women, maybe 10 of them, all sitting on high stools like this by a big board, and that board had a lot of dials on it.
Yeah.
And the needles would swing on the dials.
Really?
And her job was to, when I think there were three dials primarily. When a needle would get too close to a certain mark, she'd turn a wheel, and the needle would come back down. And then, I don't know if the one wheel contain all three of those dials, but her mission in life was to make sure that those needles did not exceed those indices.
Yeah.
And what she was doing was refining uranium for the atomic bomb.
Did she know that that's what they were doing?
No.
She had no idea?
She didn't know what she was doing. That's what I said. That wasn't an insult. It was just a fact.
Yeah.
All she knew was she'd turn a wheel to make that needle stay between the indices And of course, after the war was over, she learned what she had been doing.
That's why.
And I lived somewhere there. I was born in 1940, September of 40. So, the war started in December 8th, 1941. The Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor on December 7th.
Yeah.
So, Franklin Delano Roosevelt was the president at the time, and he asked Congress the next day to declare war on Japan and say it had existed since the day before was the 7th. So technically, the war began December 7th, 1941. And so by the time she was in Oak Ridge, I was, less than 3 years old, or 2 years old or something.
Mm-hmm.
So don't remember much about that. But then when the war was over and they shut down Oak Ridge, we went back to Chattanooga, Tennessee, and with my where my grandmother was, and we moved in with my grandfather and grandmother, and I lived with them until, and then meanwhile my mother got a job at Sears Roebuck, and was working at Sears Roebuck, and then pretty soon after she was employed by them, they had an opening in Albany, Georgia, and asked her if she would like transfer to Albany, and she said yes. So she did, and she took my sister with her to live with her. I stayed with my grandparents. Then when she got transferred from Albany to St. Petersburg, Florida, it was the end of the summer after my third grade in school, that I went to Florida, and I lived with her there while I was in the fourth grade. And then after that, I went back to Tennessee for the fifth grade, back to Florida for the sixth grade, back to Tennessee for the seventh grade.
It's a lot of moving.
Yeah. And every time my sister and I rode the train from Johnson City, Tennessee to St. Petersburg, Florida, it was a 23-hour trip. And my sister and I were together, but no adults with us, just her and me on the train alone for 23 hours.
Wow.
So that would be unheard of today, but that's what we did.
Was that common? Were there other kids on the train?
No.
23 hours on a train. Wow. Yeah, that would never happen today.
No, it wouldn't happen. But it wasn't all bad. We had some little books, I guess, to read and keep us occupied, and I did a lot of looking out the window. And then when we first got to Florida, looked out the window, and miles and miles and miles of palmettos, mm-hmm. pine trees, and palm trees came later, but miles and miles of palmettos, a lot of free land available.
Wow, that's wild.
So anyway, that might have lent something to my I wouldn't call it courage, but it helped me accustom to doing things by myself, not having to have a lot of adult help to do that. But then I was back in Tennessee. I started the 8th grade, and my grandfather died about 2 weeks after school started. So my mother was in Florida. She came up for the funeral. She went back to Florida, and then about for probably 2 months later, then my grandmother and I moved to Florida and joined my mother and sister there. And when I was 12 years old, my sister had joined the Amateur Athletic Union swim team in St. Petersburg.
Yeah.
And she used to come home after swimming practice, and she'd, like Tess faint heart. Oh, I'm so tired of, and so I got tired of hearing her complain. And I said, well, Anna, if it's that hard, why don't you quit? And her response was, oh, you could never do it. You could never do it. So I kind of resented that. So I said, well, we'll see if I can do it or not. So I went down, talked to the coach, and I said, can I join your swimming team? That girl over there is my sister. And he said, well, can you swim? I said, yeah, I can swim. He said, okay, well, come down tomorrow or whatever day and try out. I'll see how well you swim. So I did, and he said, yeah, you can swim well enough, so join the team. So I did. I started competitive swimming then when I was 12 years old.
How did you pick breaststroke?
Breaststroke?
Yeah.
Well, in those days, you were allowed to swim underwater with breaststroke. And I had learned to swim when we dammed up the creek up in Powder Branch, Tennessee, where I lived with my grandparents. There was a big creek that ran down. Grandparents' house was on a gently sloping hill, not a mountain, but a hill, that the road ran in front of the house, and then there was just some blank land beyond the road, and then in our case, then up another hill. But about a quarter of a mile north, it was that flat land transitioned to just a bigger area of flat land, and the creek ran through it. So all the kids that lived up there, up and down the holler, as they called it, we erected a dam. And what we did was say the creek at ground level was probably 15 feet wide. So we got a big log, a legitimate tree, and we cut the trees down ourselves and so forth. So we hauled it down there, and we lay that log across from one bank of the creek to the other, and then we cut smaller trees and put those trees together, leaning against the log that formed the dam, and then we took mud and packed it in between the various logs, and that created the water stop.
Yeah.
And the creek rose. So in there somewhere, I learned how to swim, and then we had a Milligan College is still there. Milligan College between Johnson City and Elizabethton, and they had a swimming pool. And one of the kids had an entree to the pool some way. A relative or whatever, but we went to that college, and that was the first time I'd seen a pool. And in there somehow, I started swimming underwater and opened my eyes underwater. And it was fun to swim underwater. So when I was maybe that fifth grade, or maybe some of the time before the fourth grade, about age 8 or so is when I first started swimming. Now back to Florida, when my sister told me I couldn't do it, I said, well, I think I can. And I joined the swimming team at the spa pool, and they had breaststroke events. You could swim underwater. So I said, that's a natural. So I did breaststroke, and the coach had us swim every event that he wanted to see what we could do. I did breaststroke and butterfly. And then when it got into serious competition, I was stuck with a breaststroke. So at age 12, I started. By the time I was 14, 2 years later, I was the Florida state champion in the AAU 12 or 14 and under age group. I won state at swimming underwater. In high school, swam underwater, sophomore and junior year. Then I moved to Fort Lauderdale. My mother got transferred again. And so my senior year, I spent the first 6 weeks of my senior year in St. Petersburg. In those days, they had 6-week grading periods. So after 6 weeks, you get your first report card. So I stayed in St. Petersburg, and I was the day before the first football game, and I was on the football team too. The superintendent, the principal, came out to the field. We were out on the field just in what they call shells, shoes, shorts, and just a jersey and shoulder pads and a helmet. And the principal came out and said, Jimmy. And he used to I guess he probably knew every kid in school, called us all by our first name. He asked me where I lived, and I was staying with a friend there. My mother had moved to Fort Lauderdale, but I wanted to stay there and finish my last year in high school with all my little buddies. And so she had to move before the previous school year was out. That would be like April or May of 1957 when she moved to Fort Lauderdale. And I stayed there with a little buddy to end the school year. And then after the summer, I came back there and was staying with a friend. The principal said, where do you live? And I told him, with a friend. Where did you live last year? And I told him I lived with another friend, and my mother got transferred. He said, well, you're ineligible. Said, if you played one down of football, we'd have to forfeit the whole season because you're ineligible, because you had to live in the school district. At the end of the prior semester, you had to live there permanently, and your mother was gone. You're living there temporarily, so you're disqualified. You can't play football. Well, that broke my heart because I was a much better swimmer than I was a football player, but I loved football. I love the rough sport. So then I moved to Fort Lauderdale as 6 weeks into my senior year, and Fort Lauderdale had their football team was vastly superior to our team in St. Petersburg. So I watched them practice one day, and I said, I don't want to get in that mess. I'll stick to swimming. So I swam, and that winter, we had a new coach that had come down to Florida from Michigan, and I think he was determined to build a reputation for himself. The new coach in town, and so he really worked us hard. And what happened was all the kids on the swimming team had spent the first period, I don't remember what time it started, say 8 o'clock, 8 to 8:15 or something was the first period. All the swimmers had that as our physical education class, and we were in the swimming pool at 7 o'clock every morning over on the beach. And the high school was right downtown, right in the middle of downtown Fort Lauderdale. And the swimming pool was on the beach. And so we were in that pool every day at 7. and 7 until about 8:30, and then back in the pool that afternoon at 3:30 until 5. So about 3 hours a day. And that winter was the coldest winter in Florida's history up until that point. And it might have been colder since, I don't know, but at that time, the winter of 1957-58 was coldest ever. And that was an outdoor, unheated, 50-meter saltwater pool. And I hated every minute of it. Hated it. Cold water, just, I'd be so cold, I'd shiver like this, and my arm muscles would tighten up so that I couldn't get a full stretch to swim. So I'd have to have, the other kids would put stuff called atomic balm on my biceps so to loosen them up enough so that I could stroke. And so I had to swim because, my mother used to say, Jim, you're going to get a college education if it kills me. And I was kind of reasoning through that. Mother, I don't see why my education would kill you or not. She was making a little joke. So I had to swim to get a scholarship because she couldn't afford to send me to college. So I got the scholarship and I went to college. Yeah, and I swam 2 years at the University of Florida, and then it was an outdoor pool again, and I would get back to my dorm, and my eyes were just, I couldn't hold them open to study. So I did very poorly, and I decided I'm going to transfer to Florida State, a different university, start all over, and study more, no swimming, and I think I can do it. So I transferred, and I did it. My grades just went straight up. I discovered that if you read the book, whatever the subject is, read the book. There's part of what they want you to know in that book. And so I did real well at Florida State. I had a 3, something like a 3.6 average out of 4, I believe is what it was. And 12 days after I graduated, I was in the Navy. Just drove over to Pensacola, Florida, and entered the Navy on January 2nd, 1963. And I spent 22 and a half years in the Navy. Started off in pilot training, but my vision went to 20/25. And so the Navy said, no more piloting for you, but you can become a pilot's helper, a naval flight officer, or NFO. And I originally said, no, I get in an airplane behind some idiot that doesn't know any more than I do about flying and all that. And so I took a ground job in Washington, D.C. But every night we had a bunch of young people that lived in that building, and we'd sit on the stoop, and we'd buy a case of beer, and we'd sit out there and drink beer and blab with each other, and we'd watch all the airplanes come in on an approach called the river visual. They come down the Potomac River and then make kind of a hard turn and land on whatever the runway was, 18, 19, something, the southerly runway. And I just kept seeing those airplanes and saying, boy, wonder where they've been or where they're going. So I went across to the Navy's Bureau of Personnel and said, hey, that NFO job I was told about 9 months ago, is that still available? And the guy said, yeah. I said, well, can I go? And he said, yeah, we need people. So I got a transfer, and I went back to Pensacola, and I checked in at Pensacola 2 years to the day from the first day that I checked in Pensacola, January 3rd, 1963. This was January 3rd, 1965. And I went through the backseat training, and I did all of that. And then my first assignment was in San Diego, California, at Miramar, Naval Air Station Miramar. And I got out to Miramar on September 9th, 1965. So it had taken me 8 months to go through all the backseat training and get my wings, get designated as a backseater.
Yeah.
And then, so I went through the training for the F4, became what's known as a radar intercept officer in the F4 Phantom. When I finished the training in the Phantom, I got sent to my permanent squadron was Fighter Squadron 143, the Puking Dogs. And I had 2 cruises in there, and then later on the Puking Dogs were transferred to the East Coast. They're still up at Oceana Naval Air Station now in Virginia Beach, Virginia. Still there. They're flying single-seat F-18s. The latest, greatest fighter in the Navy, the F-18 Super Hornet. So whatever degree of mental toughness I have was cultivated by watching my mother dig for a living to support 2 kids. And that winter of 1957-58 in that swimming pool at 7 o'clock in the morning and for an hour and a half, and then back that afternoon at 3:30, I hated every instant of that. But I had to do it. So, I probably talked to myself a lot in those days, trying to convince me to this isn't so bad. I say, yes, it is. No, it's not that bad. Yes, it is. Oh, you can do it. Well, I don't want. Well, do it anyway. You don't have a choice. Don't talk to me like that. I'll talk to you any way I want to. Do it. So I did it. And that got me the scholarship. But then in my time in the Navy, I was shot down in North Vietnam, and I went to the prison downtown. We called it it was the Hoa Lo prison because it was on Hoa Lo Street, but we called it the Hanoi Hilton. And there were over 30 different prisons all around. If you were in any one of them, you were in the Hanoi Hilton. But that was a miserable winter too. I went down April 27th, so my first few months there were like living on an oven, a kitchen oven, hot, and then the winter was really cold. But every time I'd say, man, it's cold out there, I'd remember, yeah, but it's not as cold as it was in Fort Lauderdale in 1957 and 58. So the temperature misery got diminished quite a bit when I remember Fort Lauderdale and that swimming pool. And prison was not fun. They had some bumper stickers in those days that said, POWs never have a nice day. Well, that was true. Some very bright guy came up with that idea and put it on a bumper sticker. But it was, I noted that nobody liked it. Nobody volunteered to go there. But we're all there, and some guys fared better than the others. And markedly, in my mind, the Navy guys endured much better than the Air Force guys.
Really?
And I said, well, why would that be? Because the Navy and Marines had, the Navy lived on ships, so we'd fly our mission and go back to the ship. The Marines were stationed at friendly stations in the South, and they had very meager accommodations. They started off in tents, I think, and then made some barracks. But the Air Force guys, they were all down in Thailand, and I think one or two of them were squadrons were in South Vietnam, but they had nice barracks and everything. They go fly their missions and go back to their home base, land, debrief the mission, go take a nap, get all clean and scrubbed, and then go over to the officer club and have a wonderful dinner, cocktails before dinner, wine with dinner, more cocktails after dinner, and then back to these little, they called them hooches, but they were about the equivalent of a double-wide trailer, mobile home today. And, they were living just fine, living like they weren't in a war zone at all. Everything was great. I had big parties at the O clubs. Some guy would shoot down a MiG. They'd have a party that night and blow the roof off the place. Wonderful time. And so I think the Air Force guys were accustomed to much, much better living conditions than the Navy ever was.
Yeah.
And so it seemed like in Hanoi, and I didn't say anything to them. You didn't want to insult people in prison and aggravate them. You tried to just get along as softly as you could. But I think that the Navy was more accustomed to hard living, and the Marines the same way. Mm-hmm. And so we just endured the misery a little better than the Air Force guys.
Mm-hmm. So let me kind of take a different tact, or not a different tact. I want to ask a better question. So you're talking about mental toughness, and years ago you spoke to a group of people I had at a seminar, mm-hmm. and then when we were hanging out last night, you said, I wish I had said something else. And we could talk about that, or another way to think about it is baby Jase. He's a year and a half now, and in not too long, he'll be going out into life, right? Just for you guys watching at home, my he's gone by his initials, JB, for how long? Your whole life or most of your life?
When I checked into VF 143, March of 66.
Huh.
I checked in there, and 15 minutes later, I was JB.
Oh, they named you that?
Yeah.
Oh, they did?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
They just started calling me JB, and I said, I'd always been Jim before. So by that time, I was 25 years old. 25 and a half years old. That's when I became JB.
Oh, okay. So my initials are JB, my son's initials are JB. So I call... I'm JB, you're JB2, and he's JB3. Yep. I call him Baby JB.
Baby JB.
So JB3 will be entering life before too long, and hopefully you'll be around a while. But if you weren't, or just to have it recorded, like what life lessons or thought process or whatever do you think would be most beneficial to him? What would you want him to know?
For a general guideline in getting through life or dealing with life, handling life successfully, excelling in life, any aspect of life that you want to consider, I would tell him, one, to be honest with everybody and mainly with himself. Be honest with yourself. Don't ever lie to yourself, and don't lie to anybody else. And that would be foremost. Second, to live your life with as much integrity as he possibly could. Don't lie, don't cheat, don't steal, don't kick another guy's dog or drink his whiskey or chase his wife. Essentially, live by the 10 Commandments in the Christian Bible. I'm not religious, but of my whole life I've tried to live by the Ten Commandments. I can't remember the last time I told a lie. Well, yeah, I can. It was when I first got into the prison in Hanoi. That's been over 50 years ago. See, 72, that's at 28, and this is 25. That's 53 years ago, I guess. I lied to the interrogators. That's the last time that I remember telling a lie.
What'd you lie to them about?
Everything. They asked me questions. We weren't supposed to tell them anything except name, rank, service number, and date of birth. That's all they were supposed to ask us, and that's all we were supposed to tell them. That's according to the code of conduct, the military code of conduct for all military members, regardless of what service. But they were asking all kinds of questions, and it was my third cruise in Vietnam when I got shot down, and so I had plenty of time to formulate how I was going to handle myself with the interrogators. And I said, I'm going to be the stupidest coward that they ever met. So that was my self-identity that I established and adopted, and it worked like a charm. In fact, I'm real proud of that. I learned about 15 years ago that the U.S. Air Force had adopted my behavior, and they were teaching that in the survival school.
Really?
Yeah. So everybody that goes to survival training up there was taught to do what I did in Hanoi. Because when I got back, we were debriefed exclusively, and a little booklet was produced about all of our debrief. And so that was in official Navy documents, that the story of how I handled the interrogators. And then about a year and a half ago, I was in Pensacola, and I learned that they are doing the same thing in their survival school in Pensacola.
Wow. Was that based on reading your report they adopted it?
Yeah.
So what happened? The interrogator just...
Well, the object with the interrogators was to make them leave you alone. You know, you don't want to make yourself the invisible man or somebody that they don't want to deal with. They were trying to get the most recent shoot downs, you know, the latest guys, the newest guys in prison, trying to get us to write letters to congressmen and so forth, and you know, beg them to end the war. They were trying to use us against ourselves. And so I lied about everything. I'll give you a quick example. Stupid and cowardly. That's what I was. They said, what was your mission? Well, my mission that day was to fight MiGs, to find some MiGs and shoot them down. I said, I don't know. Must know. No, I don't know. I didn't go to the brief. I overslept. I didn't go to the brief. You know, the guy's looking at me. He said, what was your target? I don't know. I didn't go to the brief. Oh, what shot you down? Was it anti-aircraft cannons or one of our MiGs? And I said, I don't know. Must know. No, I don't know. I was afraid. Where were you shot down? I don't know. I was lost. Well, now I haven't given him one bit of information that he cared about. every squadron in the air wing had a call sign, like my call sign from my squadron was Screaming Eagle. And so you tell them, when you're identifying yourself in the combat role, you say, this is Screaming Eagle 102, whatever the side number of your airplane was, 102 through 100, 101, 102, up to ever how many airplanes it has, like 13 airplanes. So Screaming Eagle 113. And another squadron was called Old Nick. Another one was Bengal. Another one was Hoboken. And so the interrogator said, what is Bengal? That was the Marine Corps A6 squadron in my air wing. And I said, Bengal? That's a cat. It's a big cat. It's like a lion, a Bengal lion. And they're in, I think they're in Africa. They live in Africa. Okay, a Bengal is a tiger that lives in India. So I was wrong. But I was trying, right? I was trying. What is a Hoboken? Hoboken is a big piece of land, like like square miles of acreage. Do you know what acreage is? And it's Hoboken is a big piece of land, and like in New York. Are you familiar with New York? It's a big piece of land in New York. Well, Hoboken is a city in New Jersey. So I was wrong. But I was trying, right? Trying. So I did that, and he asked me every call sign in the air wing, and I ran him around in a circle. He said, what is Old Nick? And I said, Old Nick, that's a candy bar. It's a candy bar in the United States. Do you have candy in Vietnam? Candy. See, it's got caramel in the middle, and it's got chocolate coating on it, and it's got peanuts on it. It's really good. You like candy? Played to this guy, and he's sitting there thinking. So anyway, 3 days around the clock. The interrogator would leave, and I'd lay back down on my bedboard, which is 3 pieces of wood nailed together. That was my bed. That's what they had. And so finally, after the 3rd day, he stood up, grabbed his hat and his little notebook, stormed past me and says, "Oh, for a man of your rank, you are very stupid." And he steamed out the door. And they would sit you on a little stool like this so that you had to look up to him sitting behind a little table. Maybe a table 2.5 or 3 feet wide, 28 inches deep. And he'd unfold his little book, put his hat there, unfold his pen, and expecting to take notes on what you said. He didn't take any notes on me. And when he stormed out, I was a lieutenant commander in the Navy, and for a man of your rank, you were very stupid. And I never saw him again. So I beat him. And then I had another interrogator that was, I think that the old time prisoners named him, and we were not in. I was not in contact with anybody. But later on, I got integrated into the prison population, and the old guys, the POWs who'd been there 5, 6, 7, 8 years, would talk about interrogator, and they said one was called the soft soap fairy. Soft soap fairy, and I believe that was the other interrogator that I was talking to. And he was a very, very mild. Like the first meeting with him, he said, "How are you?" And I said, "Well, I think I'm all right. I'm not hurt. I'm not very happy." Now, that was a completely sane answer, wasn't it? Do you expect me to be happy? I'm a POW. I'm not happy, but I'm not happy. But I wasn't hurt in the ejection.
Yeah.
And he said, things like, "Where are you from? What is your home in the United States?" Not supposed to tell him. But I'm also supposed to be able to write letters home. I've got a wife and a 2-year-old kid at home. I'd like to hear how my kid's doing. Get a letter from my wife, maybe tell me about my kid. So the Red Cross is I'm supposed to be able to communicate with home and letters. So if I'm going to get a letter home, I'm going to have to address it, right? So what's the harm in me telling the guy where I'm from? Except the code of conduct says you won't. And I told the Navy when I got back, you take your code of conduct and shove it.
Yeah.
It's not worth a damn. When they came up with it, they didn't know what they were doing. You know, it's a great idea, but it's bullshit. Nobody is going to get through an interrogation session without talking some. So anyway, I talked with that guy for 3 days also. And I talked with him late at night, and the first guy would interrogate me during the day. But I would be interrogated. I'd sleep. I was exhausted when I was shot down. Part of why I was shot down, I was exhausted. So finally at the end, the guy asked me a question that had a little, most of it was just innocent stuff. You know, like, why do you fight in the war? I said, I fight in the war because I'm a professional military man, and I do what my government tells me, just like you do. I put everything back on him that I could. Well, his first question was, what do you think of the war? Yeah, I said, I think the war is bad. So he probably said, this guy thinks the war is bad. I get him to write an anti-war letter to his congressman or maybe make a film or an interview of some sort, send it back to the Navy and send it to NBC News, send it everywhere he could with this American POW saying, I think the war is bad and we ought to quit and blah, blah, blah. So he said, after he asked what I thought of the war, and I told him I thought it was bad, he said, why do you fight in the war? And that's when I said, I'm a professional military man, and I do what my government tells me, and they tell me to fight in the war, so I fight in the war. Just like you do. So sometime that third day or night, it was around the clock, you know, I couldn't tell what time it was, and I'd wake up and look outside. It was dark. I didn't know if it 6 at night and midnight or what. But he asked me a question that had a military bent to it. And I looked at him and I said, you know, you're not supposed to ask me questions like that. I didn't defy him. I didn't say, you can't ask me questions like that. But I put the onus on him. You know, you're not supposed to ask me questions like that. I said, when I came to your country, I came here an honorable man. And someday I hope to go back to my country. And I want to go back an honorable man. If I answer your questions, I can't go back and honorable man. He just sat and looked at me for, 3 or 4 of the longest minutes I ever lived in my life, I guess. Then he had his little book. He folded his little book up, put the cap back on his pen, put his little book in his little satchel. Had a little satchel like school kids carry, a satchel with a flap and two little buckles. He put all this stuff back together. He stood up, picked up his satchel, picked up his hat, looked at me a couple more minutes, and then just walked out. Never saw him again. So I kind of beat the interrogators at their own game, I guess. And the day we were released, they took us from the prison to a halfway house, just a little concrete building along the road. Instead of going directly to the airport, we stopped at that building, and they had some cookies and like orange drinks, like in a orange clear bottle. You can see it's some sort of orange drink. And that interrogator, the second one I talked about, was there. And he came up to me and he said, "So, today you go back to your home." And I looked at him and I said, "We're told that we're going home today." I didn't want to, could have been a trick, I didn't say, "Yeah, we're going home. Screw you.
Yeah.
You're staying here." I just said, "That's what we're told." He looked at me and nodded and walked away. Another guy that he had talked to told me later, said he came up to him and said, "So you go back to America or United States or home?" And the guy said, "Yeah." I said, the interrogator looked around and said, "Someday I hope to come to your country and stay." Oh, we converted him. What was did I answer your question or did I?
Totally. So we took a detour. That was awesome. We were talking about what other life advice would you want entrepreneurs to know or Jase to know?
Yeah. Well, I said to him to be honest, and then next to live with total integrity if he could. And live by the 10 Commandments in the Christian Bible. Yeah. And whatever task he's performing, if it's difficult, just don't give up. Don't give up. Be determined. Adopt the attitude that I was never very smart, so I substituted determination for intelligence. And like when I competitive swimming, when I first started swimming at 12 years old. I was small for my size too, and all the kids were bigger. They had a lot wider wingspans than I did, and they could take a stroke they should get farther. So I likened myself to a tadpole in a big pond full of big frogs. So while they're stroking like that, I'm stroking like this, twice as much. And I just, in order to win, I said, I'm just not going to let that guy beat me. And I tried as hard as I could. And that's what I would recommend to him or to anybody, everybody. You come across a lot of people in life that they any little thing that they're confronted with, they'll likely say, "Oh, it's too hard. It's just too hard. I'm not going to do it," and they give up. They give up. They don't put their all into it. So, determination and stick-to-itiveness, what I call the other aspect of it. So I think that's about it. Live a life of integrity, and plus, don't fall in love with yourself and think that you have to be the center of attention. Every time you walk into a room, you don't have to walk into the room and take over and say, "Everybody look at me, listen to me, pay attention to me, applaud me, love me." Just take your place in society, take your place with your fellow man, and try to fulfill that role rather than try to be the star of the show.
You're really good with people, and like here, where you have some awesome friends here. What do you think your secret to that? Is it what you just shared, or is there something else?
Well, I've got an airplane they like to fly, so they all like to fly my airplane. I've taken them all for flights. I've taken it's in my logbook. I think the number is 103. Either 103 or 108. I've taken that many people flying in my airplane. But my best friends here I fly with them every weekend. There's three of them. They alternate. They take turns flying with me because I let them fly in the front seat, and they have conventional airplanes with yokes. Mainly they have a yoke and sit beside somebody. My airplane's an old military trainer, and they're in the cockpit by themselves. They've got a stick and throttle. Nobody beside them. Somebody behind them, and they like to fly the airplane. So, and I guess they've approved the way I live my life. I mean, I don't buy them flowers or anything. I don't take them candy bars. I'll give them a cigar if they need a cigar.
How about money? What's your top tips on? You scratched your way out of like poverty, right? Like I remember poverty. Like I remember you telling me stories about if you got new shoes, you would sleep with your shoes.
Yeah. When I was a little kid, my father and mother were. My father came home one day and told my mother, "I've joined the Navy. I'll see you." And he left. He left my mother with my father's child, a boy. So he was a half-brother to me. He was living with us at the time. So my father left my mother with his son and my sister and me. My mother was 20 years old when I was born, and I was her second child.
Who was the half brother?
Jerry.
Jerry? Okay.
Have you ever met Jerry?
I think I did years ago.
He was I think Jerry was about five or more years older than me.
Okay.
I think 7. That's another piece of advice that I would give baby JB, to surround himself with quality people. Be nice to everybody, but don't be friends with people who are not good people. Gang up on smart people, gang up on energetic people. Surround yourself with people that you want to be like, and kind of mold yourself after. You'll know when you get in any crowd. You'll know who the leaders are, and who's smart, who's not, who's lazy, who's not. Just don't associate with dumb, lazy people. associate with people that you want to be like. And in my judgment, you want to be like the smartest, most creative, generous people that you know, that you meet. So associate with them and listen a lot more than you talk.
I've heard it said recently, never get coaching from someone you wouldn't trade places with. In that topic they're coaching you on.
Don't take advice from fools.
So going back to the money thing, how did you do it, or what advice would you give him about money, about creating wealth?
He should have a lot of respect for money. Money is a medium of exchange. You exchange it for something you want or need. And I would say, when I was a little boy, didn't have any money. My grandfather worked at a grocery store. My mother was working as far back as I can remember. And so have respect for money in the way that you don't, it's very valuable. So you don't waste it. You don't throw it away. You don't spend it on frivolous activities or items. So save all your money that you can. My first, my first 2 or 3 years in the Navy, I saved at least 1/2 of my pay. Put it in the bank, saved it. Learn how money works. Learn that if you have a credit card, it's free credit. You can pay for something with a credit card, and you pay no interest on it for the first 30 days, is usually the way they work. So pay off your credit card every month. As soon as you get your bill, pay it as soon as you can. Never pay interest on your credit card or any kind of loan. Well, you're going to have to, like a mortgage for your home or something, or buy a car, unless you can pay cash for those things, you're going to end up paying interest. But if you get some extra money sometime, pay off the item that has the highest interest rate on it. Like you might have a loan for 10% and one of them for 13% and one of them for 5%. Don't pay off the 5% loan or the 10, pay off the 13%. That's the one that's costing you most to borrow. So pay that off as quickly as you can. And then always have some cash while you're saving money. And you save it all in the same checking or savings account, but just determine, like, this $5,000 is my emergency fund. Always have an emergency fund, enough money that you can pay off any kind of emergency that happens. I mean, if your house burns down, you can't pay off the house or pay off the mortgage overnight, but any, small catastrophes that your emergency fund can remedy, have an emergency fund. So learning how money works, how to borrow money at the lowest interest rate possible. For example, people have mortgages and they have a monthly payment for that mortgage. Well, every time you pay the monthly payment, this much of that payment is going for interest on that loan, and that much is going to repay the loan. And if you've got a monthly payment, you make a payment, and then you're accruing interest on that a month's worth of interest to make that payment. Well, if you had a mortgage where you had bi-monthly payments, a payment every 2 weeks, you can save a tremendous amount of money by paying every 2 weeks. Why? Because you're not using all that month's worth of interest. If you pay once a month, you're just using 2 weeks worth of payment of interest. So you pay it every 2 weeks. You're paying interest on 2 weeks' use of that money, not a month. Almost everybody can pay twice a month. So learn about those things. Learn about any tricks or smart uses for money that you can, and save as much as you can. Don't be frivolous. When I made lieutenant junior grade in the Navy, I bought a 1965 TR4 Triumph, TR4 British sport car, 1965. The next new car I bought was a 2001 Corvette. Now, when I went to pilot training, when we got commissioned, the guys like me that came out of college and went into to pre-flight training, we got commissioned. Guys would go out and buy their first sports car. I waited until I made commander to buy my first Corvette, but it was 4 or 5 years old when I bought it. My Triumph in '65 and my Corvette in 2001. Do the math. That's 36 years between new cars. A new car is one of the worst investments that you can make. So don't buy new cars. Buy a car that's 1 or 2 years old. You save a lot of money.
What about career? Like choosing what career to pursue?
That's hard to judge unless you really know the person. It's hard to imagine what you think that person should do.
Yeah.
But the guideline that I would employ is find something that you really love doing, and if you can make a living doing that, then do that. That'll become your career. But for you to do that, you gotta shake a lot of bushes to see what falls out of the tree. So you're going to have to sample a lot of things. And see, I started working when I was 13 years old. Well, no, when I was in the 4th grade, I wanted a bicycle. And my mother said, well, if you want a bicycle, you'll have to figure out how you could pay for it. I can't buy it for you. So I said, okay. And I thought about it, and I saw some other kids throw a newspaper. I said, I can get a paper route just like they do. So I did. And I got a paper route. And my mother, I can't remember exactly how that happened. Either she bought it for me and I paid her back, or she put the down payment, paid for it on time from Sears Roebuck. But I had a bicycle and a paper route. And that paper route was in the back streets of St. Petersburg, and most of the streets were sand. I couldn't even ride the bike. I had to push the bike along through the sand till we got back on hard, some asphalt or bricks. They had a lot of brick streets back then. So I did that. So
that's wild. So we're actually late to leave, but so anything else that you would want me to know or baby Jase to know?
Little philosophical things. I've already said how I would advise somebody to live their life. But little philosophical things are like the Marine Corps has a good slogan. When the going gets tough, the tough get going. Remember that. If you find yourself in a bad set of circumstances sometime, just tough it out. It'll get better. Hardly anything in life is constant. Everything is going to change, and when you're on top of the world, you're probably going to stump your toe somewhere along the way. It's just, that's the way life is. It's up and down. So don't get discouraged. Just tough it out. Keep going. Things will get better. When things are really good, then stay inside all day don't go outside. Don't do anything that'll upset it.
I remember 2 pieces of advice. You give me a bunch, but 2 that I use almost daily. One was, if you think of something you want to do it right away. Something you need to do. Like, don't put it off. Do that thing immediately. Otherwise you forget. And then the second one is, like, if you're fixing something or you're doing something, don't force it. Like, for instance, if maybe I'm trying to close the trunk on my car and it's not going, don't just force it. There's a reason it's not going. Find that reason and then close it. And that saved me from breaking a lot of stuff.
Yeah, don't be impetuous. If it hurts when you do that, don't do that. If you can't close the door, like Lou, you didn't get to meet Lou yesterday, but he was towing his airplane out of the hangar, and he got over where the hangar door, his door was like the one you saw that, bent. He couldn't get his airplane, couldn't get his little tractor to move. And he looked down and he thought it was caught in the track where the door comes down and ends up with. And so he said, and he jerked on the little tractor. Then he heard this whack. And he looked up and he just broke his propeller in half. Yeah, a 3-bladed propeller. And instead of stowing it like that, he had one of them sticking straight up, and that one was caught on the hangar door. Oh. So he just jerked it instead of saying, now, wait a minute, and let me stand back here and see what's wrong. And if he'd have just looked up, he'd have said, oh.
That happened yesterday?
No, it happened last year.
Oh, what a bummer.
Those propellers cost $19,000.
Plus, he didn't get to fly that day.
He didn't fly that day.
Oh, my goodness. Hey, to wrap it up, would you say your name?
J.B. Souder.
Luis just said James Burton Souder.
I'm Wheezy's boy toy.
That's how we're going to open it. Thanks, Dad. That was awesome.
Thanks for joining me today on To the Promised Land podcast. If you're ready to grow your impact, master your message, and become the kind of speaker people can't ignore, head on over to our website, to thepromisedlandpodcast.com. That's where the real transformation begins. The links are all in the description.